My name is Max Young. I'm the CEO of CAP BPM. We have been working with Camunda for about 9 years now. Before this, I was a part of a company called Lombardi, which was sold to IBM. I don't know if anyone here has ever heard of Lombardi. All right. Oh, there we go. Wait, no, you work for me. I also worked for Pega for 3 years as an LSA. So migration is near and dear to our heart. One of the things that we specialize in is that we have the ability to sort of parse in the exports of other engines and then transform them over to Camunda. The sort of the things that I think that you have to be thinking about when you think about a migration is that you're translating essentially from one culture to another. How many people here speak more than one language? Just a show of hands, please. Okay, so you know that when you translate from one language to another, you don't just do a word-for-word translation, right? That doesn't make sense. It's awkward, it's weird. You're not really conveying what you meant to convey. You have to actually map to the culture and the references that you're actually going to. So when you think about a migration, you want to make sure that you're not doing just a note-to-note rendition from what was previously happening to what needs to happen now, right? You actually want to be able to go forward. You want to be able to go forward and take advantage of what's available to you in the new world. So for example, let's say you have a process that, I don't know, looks up a customer, composes a note, sends them a message, and then writes that into a database. In traditional BPMN and C7, you might have made that 4 activities, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. It's not the way you would really do it in C8. In C8, you'd make that, an ad hoc agentic activity and let the AI determine what the sequence of events is, because that gives you the latitude to change it. Like maybe at some point you want to look up, see if this is a, $3 million customer, and you send them a different note and a different message. So when you think about migration, just think about the fact that you don't always want to do a one-to-one note-for-note migration. The reason you're moving to this new world is so you can take advantage of the things that are there. What are the reasons that you should migrate? You should think about your cost and scalability. When you're working with an older solution, you inherently have technical debt, and it gets bigger every single day that you're on it. You want to be able to take advantage of out-of-the-box functionality like IDP. That is, for example, the ability to be able to parse documentations. Companies used to charge $1 bazillion for this back in the day. We call it OCR. It's now native to Camunda. You want to be able to sidestep complexity. When you think about traditional processes, especially the kinds that we all used to build in C7, you can sort of think of them like Asian kanji. Like they're cast in iron, and they sort of define a very complex idea. That's fantastic, but what if you need to change the idea? So instead of 6,000 kanji characters that you would have in Japanese, use essentially the 26 letters of the English alphabet. And you can use that to compose any idea. So you want to be thinking about stepping out of the complexity of hard-coded sequences and sort of compose those together as you're taking advantage of what's available to you in the new world. You want to be able to do scaling. I have a customer. I'm going to say a number, and you're going to think I said one number, then I'm going to reiterate it. I have a customer that does 1.4 trillion transactions a year. I did not say billion. Trillion transactions a year. 1.4 trillion transactions a year. That is just physically not possible with C7. Moreover, you can't even think that way. That word is not in your vocabulary. You cannot express that idea. Your leadership will laugh at you if you bring it up. Because that is available to you in C8, you should think about migrating that way. One of the most powerful things in C8 is that you have enhanced metrics. So the way C8 works is that not only does it capture who did what, when did they do it, when did they get the task, when did they restart, when did they engage, when did they pass it off, how long did it take, all that stuff. But it actually has the ability to export that to an LLM-ready data set that can be consumed by your vector DB and fed into your AI. So what you're doing is as you're going along, you're building the data sets that you're going to wish you had 6 months from now. And that's just out of the box. You're giving all that up if you stay with your current technology. it's not available to you. And finally, you get ahead of technical debt. Next slide, please. Thank you. The other thing you want to do is you want to decouple orchestration from execution. So if you're a process nerd, we talk a lot about orchestration versus choreography. Choreography is if we all wanted to learn a dance. We would have all stayed up late last night, we would have learned the steps, we would have come up here and we would have done the dance together. Orchestration is a central authority that sits back and says, you do this, and you do this, and you do this, and now you do this. And basically allows those individual units to focus on the expertise of doing that one thing extremely well, rather than having to coordinate with everyone else and keep track of changes. That's the fundamental predicate assumption of C8. So you want to be thinking about that. You want to be thinking about job workers. Job workers allow you to decouple the actual workload from the memory space of the execution engine and let that run separately, scale up and scale down without having to double and triple the size and the footprint of your engine. That is huge. I have one customer that was processing 800,000 transactions, and it was taking them 7 hours every night on Sunday, from midnight till 7 a.m. We changed that to 15 minutes. The way we did it is that we just scaled up we used AWS step functions in the back end to execute the job of the job workers, and we essentially scaled that up to about 20,000 instances. Camunda started handing off the tasks. All those guys finished the work and they brought it back in. We previously didn't have the vocabulary to solve the problem in that way. And I thought this is a cool time to be solving these kinds of cool problems. You want to think about, when you're migrating, you want to be thinking about your Spring Boot migration. Often, those of us who worked in the C7 space, we would build heterogeneous or homogeneous applications that had been Spring Boot with embedded Camunda engines. You can still do something very similar to that, but you want to be thinking about taking advantage of the new features of Spring Boot and how that works for you. You want to be thinking about how your listeners are going to translate. Listeners are basically little spies that stick on your process and either record things or take actions when those things start or stop or do a significant state change. All of that is also supported, so you get the good stuff from C7. You just get all of this other cool stuff as well. Next slide, please. So what actually changes from your architecture perspective is your execution model changes. So you're going from sort of an end memory, just all the stuff that only C7 can hold, that's what you can do, to a distributed thing where it's all the stuff that C8 can orchestrate, which is what you can do. And you put ad hoc on top of that, where you have little micro orchestrators out in the middle of your process. It dramatically changes the game. You get state management changes, and I'll come back to that in a little bit. And you also have to be thinking about how you manage your deployments, because you have the latitude to be changing your job workers in real time. So let me talk about that. Let's say that you're in the fintech space, and you're talking to the work number to get information about someone who needs a credit check. You can actually go change that implementation so it's actually working with, say, Experian, pull that information back. And so long as you respect your interface to the Camunda engine, you can do that at runtime. At runtime. That's huge. Next slide, please. So practical benefits are scale, resilience. You can make mistakes and recover from them. You get the ability to do polyglot and distributed applications. One of the biggest challenges, and I've been doing this for an extremely long time, one of the biggest challenges when you're working with Camunda is that when you bring it into an existing organization, that organization will often have their own embedded technologists, and they are sometimes resilient. Like there's a culture clash. Hey, I could just do this in Java. I could do this in .NET. I could do this in Node. I don't need this new schmancy thing. One of the nice things about C8 is that it inherently allows you to absorb that work. Hey, you're making these complicated connections in the back end? Awesome. we can use those. You can be part of the victory of Camunda rather than at odds with it from a political perspective. It brings everyone to the table because you have a vocabulary for orchestration. And you also get cloud-native apps. And there's actually a really cool talk about AWS that's happening right now. And if I weren't here, I'd be in that one. Next slide, please. So how do you actually do this? You have to inventory your assets, your BPMNs and your DMNs. You have to choose if you want to use a SaaS model or if you want to use self-managed. What I recommend is that you lean towards the SaaS model. If you're in a highly regulated industry where that's not possible, I still recommend that you get started with development in the SaaS model and concurrently go out and build your self-managed instances so that it's ready for landing when you're ready to land, but you're not delayed for 3 or 4 months while you figure that out. And incidentally, companies like Cat BPM can help you set that up quickly. You want to be thinking about your tooling and your testing. One of the most important things that you have to know, and we're all trained at this, as engineers, is how do I know that this worked? So let's say you do a migration. How do you have fidelity? How do you know that the thing that you did in C7 has the same result as what you did in C8? You got to be thinking about that at the beginning of your migration journey, not at the end. Because it's human nature, you'll retrofit the answer to fit to what you want it to be. You need to establish that objective immediately at the beginning. One of the things with C7 was that it kind of had this permissive but not good for you attitude around variables. So you could basically define variables globally, and these variables could be used essentially by any step in any process. It's really convenient when you're getting going. It's a terrible idea when you're trying to maintain stuff. You change a variable for like step 2 and step 19 breaks because it was expecting a string and now you're giving it a number. C8 explicitly and implicitly keeps you out of that danger because when you're working with job workers, you have to explicitly give it the inputs and the outputs that you expect, which forces a discipline on you to think about why does this activity need these variables, which allows you to build things that are more encapsulated, which means that you can change them with more confidence. And then you want to also think about your design implications. You don't do everything the same way in the new world that you did in the old world. You just don't, right? My mother is from the old country, and when we first came to the United States, she would like go into stores and she would start bargaining with people, like $30 for these jeans. How about 20? And I was like, that's just not the way we do it here, Mom. Right? But she was carrying over her culture from what she knew to the new world. You don't want to do that anymore, right? There's a different way that we do things in this place, and you want to be thinking about the design implications of that. You want to be thinking about identity. One of the really cool things, and I think this is actually coming out as a part of 8.8, is that there's an entire initiative within Camunda to resource and identity management that's coming out. So you can be super, super careful about what step can do what based on the identity of the person or the entity that's calling it. You want to be taking advantage of that because that wasn't there in C7. You want to manage your connectivity, you want to externalize your logic, and you want to think about how you scale your job workers. Without getting too technical, one of the nice things about the way C8 works is that the job workers basically say, hey, I can handle this much stuff at this rate. So your scaling becomes really, really fine-tunable. You can start saying things like, I'm going to put, something on a system that has 52 cores on it, and I know that this thing only takes like 400 milliseconds to run, so my job worker can do, 104 instances per second. And then you scale that up, you have 50 of those. And so you can do incredible things with bursts of speed, and you should know that. And then you can also conclude things like back off and handle eventual consistency. So Camunda has the ability to reconcile hundreds, thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, hundreds of millions of transactions hundreds, thousands, millions, hundreds of thousands, millions of transactions. This is not your father's Oldsmobile. You want to be thinking about how to map your Java delegates over to your job workers. You want to be taking advantage of the things that are available to you. One thing that I want to sort of talk to you about at a technical level is when you're passing information back and forth between these systems, you want to use what's called a coarse grain pattern. If you don't know what that is, talk to the first geek you run into and they'll explain it to you, but it will make your life a lot easier. You also want to implicitly version your job workers so that you can change them. So what that means is, let's say you decide to improve an integration with, I don't know, AWS. You can say, I'm going to deploy 2 concurrent versions of this. New processes get the new integration. The ones that are already in flight get the existing one until they drain out. No downtime, runtime changes, controlled risk. It's not bad. You want to be thinking about having variables and strongly typed inputs. Let me explain what I mean by this. Let's say that you have a process that needs to, look up a customer's income for verification. And you have to have their name, their social security number, and their date of birth. That's all you want to pass to your job worker. Moreover, when your job worker does the work, it should essentially be in sort of a fetch and pass perspective. So the job worker's job is to just get the information and then give it to a conventional piece of code, whether it's Java or Node or whatever. It's really important that you do that. The reason it's important that you do that is because then you can give that logic, that work, to your traditional developers, and they can write it in the traditional way that they know how to write it, and they can test it in the way that they know how to test it, and it fits into your culture of how things are tested and deployed and changed and rolled back. Does that? Can't say if you guys can't answer. So, and one suggestion on this is to make all the variables JSON serializable and just save yourself a lot of pain. We speak JSON here, right? Just make that your mantra. I'll get you a t-shirt if you like. Next one. C8 has a different idea and a more articulate idea of what errors are and how they should be handled. And you want to make sure that you study up on that and you take advantage of it. So if you're trying to talk to a backend service and the backend service breaks, it's important why it broke. If it was just like technical thing, then C8 will say, hey, this was a technical error. I'm just going to retry it 3 times. I'll log the fact that this happened, but I'm going to try again. The network failed or something. If it failed because, hey, our fraud detection system detected something weird about this guy, or we can't find this identity, but we're not saying he's rejected. That's a business problem, because you want to surface that to the business tier, so the business tier can make a business decision. Maybe the answer is, hey, Mr. Johnson, we couldn't look up your name. Could you confirm your social security number is right? Maybe, we send an SOS to the cops. I don't know what the right answer is, and neither do the other technicians. The business people do. And by surfacing the business errors to the business people, they can be in charge of what should be happening in those business contexts. So when you're thinking about your errors, you want to make sure that you're qualifying them. Is this something that the business would change the flow about or not? Right? That's just a simple checklist. You want to be thinking about your listeners. You want to be thinking about the new things. So up until next Wednesday, there's not parity. C7 had better, more functional listeners than C8. But as of next Wednesday, that is no longer true. And the listeners that are available with C8 are a lot more powerful, a lot more scalable. They can be reused. And what that means is that you can audit your processes. Hey, how many times has this application gone to the state of Nebraska? I want to flag when a customer, we know that they just, I don't know, paid off their house loan because maybe we can pitch them a car loan or something, right? You can inject these at runtime. When your business comes back to you and says, I wish I knew this and that and the other, you can do that because the listeners are decoupled. They can just extend their logic. You want to be thinking about patterns. You want to be thinking about the fact that there is a world of agentic orchestration that's available to you. There's a tremendous amount of really articulate integrations that are available to you. There are existing patterns published by companies like mine and others on the Camunda store that will tell you, hey, this is a retry pattern. This is a message notification pattern. Go out there and steal that stuff, right? It's hard won from a lot of mistakes. You don't have to reinvent this stuff from scratch. And if you're new to C8, there's probably about 4 years of experience out there if you go look for it, so that you can learn how to do things not the wrong way. There's, how can I put this? You guys ever watch horror movies? You hear like the sound in the basement and like all the teenagers go, hey, what's that sound? And they all get murdered. Don't do that, right? When you see that there's a bad thing that's going to happen, don't double click on that. Go do something else. And the bad thing that's going to happen is if you try to build your C8 processes without taking advantage of the experience of the people who've been doing it for half a decade, bad things are going to happen to you. That information is out there. It's free. Take advantage of it. Next slide, please. So when you think about migrating from a technical perspective, you want to remove your C7 starters. You want to change your application YAMLs. You want to use the Camunda client, and you want to refactor your sources. So our company does migrations, and I believe that we're somewhat unique in the way we do migrations because we guarantee an outcome or we don't get paid. That's actually in the legal contract. But the reason we do that is because we have a lot of faith in Camunda, and we have a lot of faith in C7 and in C8. What that means is that when you're thinking about how to build your systems, you want to be careful about defining your test. How do you know that you've succeeded? What's the definition of done? You want to make sure that if you're going to go climb the Himalayas, you want to have a Sherpa who's done it before. You want to make sure that you're mapping the functionality from C7 to its corresponding functionality in C8 in a way that makes sense, not just the first thing that works. When you transition over from your decision tables, Camunda 8 uses DMN version 1.3, Camunda uses 1.1. There's a little bit of subtle difference. You want to make sure that you're taking advantage of that. You want to make sure that you're taking advantage of the fact that there's the field playground, which is basically AI that allows you to write your field expressions for you. You want to make sure that things like async before, async after, that if you were taking advantage of those, if you were relying on them, that you know how to correct for that in the C8 world. And if you don't know how to do that, so you can reach out to us, info@capbpm.com. We have a 120-page white paper on how to do this. It's free. They'll tell you the things that you should be looking out for. You want to be thinking about things like job priorities. They don't exist anymore. You want to make sure that your retry times are available to you. You want to make sure that you understand that Joule and JavaScript no longer exist in the C8 world. It's all field now. So you want to make sure that you're translating equivalent logic. And you want to make sure that you're dealing with things like nested logic, external data, all that kind of stuff. Your decision tables are a really, really key point in what you're doing. Your decision tables are the steering wheel with which your business controls the flow of your process. Decision tables say, we approve a $100,000 loan for people who have a 650 credit rating if they make over $200,000 a year. And the business gets to go and change that on the fly so that they can make a different decision depending on what's happening in the markets, right? It's really important that you get this part of it right. You want to make sure that your metrics and observations, I'm not going to read all this to you. but this will be on the deck that we make available to you. But you want to make sure that you understand how the data is getting mapped so you can achieve equivalency and the knowledge that you have, and you're publishing probably to your BI engine. And you want to separate the innovation and the logic. You want to make sure that you're using modularity, reuse, independent scaling, and the polygon implementations. You want to make sure that you're extracting your business logic. You want to make sure that you're going from delegates to standalone services. And you want to integrate with workers, and you want to make sure that you're integrating with operates. So, one of the key things that I always talk about is when you are thinking about the pros and cons of a migration, there's a certain tendency in the human condition to sort of want to stay with what we know. We tend to be inherently conservative. If we've eaten this berry in the past and we eat it again, we're probably not going to die. This new berry might kill us, right? That's evolutionary sort of a backbone to us. But there's a risk there as well. The longer that you stay in your legacy technology, the longer you're incurring tech debt, the further you are away from the tip of where things are happening, the more you lack the vocabulary to be able to describe your problems and your solutions. Show of hands, how many people here have read the novel 1984? Surprising number. So the novel, the predicate assumption of this, I swear this will make sense in 45 seconds. The predicate assumption is that the government is trying to control people's thoughts by taking away their vocabulary. So you're no longer able to say, all men are created equal and born and imbued by their creator by certain unalienable thoughts. All you can say is thought crime. So regardless of the politics of the book, the thing that I took away from that is this idea that you need a vocabulary to be able to describe your problems and your solutions. And without transitioning over to what Camunda is doing in C8, you will lack the vocabulary for what's coming in AI and automation and the way that the world is shifting. It's shifting radically. And you need every tool that you have available to you in order to be able to surf this wave. So, how do you actually get into this? You want to determine all the Camunda API usages. A lot of times when those of us who did a lot of Camunda 7 stuff, we would take advantage of APIs and even like secret APIs because they were cool and they were handy. You want to identify all those. Our tooling actually is built on top of Camunda's tooling, but it goes and like systematically identifies that. It says you've got problems here. You want to be able to replace them with the officially sanctioned version, which is ever changing. You want to make sure what you're doing with a business key. So Camunda 8 doesn't really have the concept of a business key. I think 8.8 might be reintroducing it via tags, but that was a key portion of what C7 did, and frankly, it's something that C7 did very well. I recommend that you think about how you want to do that, whether it's the invoice ID or the applicant ID or whatever the case may be. You want to identify that. Next slide. And you also want to think about, your how you're going to stage and test and roll back your migrations, right? You want to think about being able to run parallel for critical things. You want to be thinking about how you're going to harden and test your application. And you want to make sure that you have a hypercare playback. You want to make sure that you know how you're going to fix things as they break. You should deliberately break them during your migration so that you can fix them. So again, I recommend that if you're thinking about migration, I recommend that you get started. It's like going to the gym. It's not going to get any easier if you put it off. And you know you have to do it. You might as well just get your butt up and go. Okay, thank you very much. I think that's everything I have. Appreciate it. My name is Max Young. You can reach me at info@capbpm, or I'm all over LinkedIn. Thanks.